Good Morning Britain needs to wipe out some of its regular presenters. They sacked Piers Morgan. It's time for another cut. Back in 2021, Piers Morgan stormed off Good Morning Britain and was then not allowed to return because he refused to apologise over his comments about Meghan Markle. On Wednesday, September 17, Susanna Reid had to try and pull guest Kevin Maguire back from the edge after falling too far into his personal bias, with Richard Madeley eventually stepping in too. Sorry, but the hosts should not have to work this hard to try and keep things neutral. Susanna and Richard were dragging the conversation back to a neutral topic, and you could see the sheer shock in Kevin's face when he wasn't getting praised for his remarks. It's not the first time that GMB fans have been forced to sit idly by as left-wing bias is spewed on the show, with fury igniting only earlier this month over Ed Balls sitting quietly while his co-host Susanna was left to grill his wife on her politics solo. They've even had Ofcom complaints in the past about it, but it seems that's the furthest from their mind. And yet, have they learned nothing? Kevin decided that today, a week after Charlie Kirk was brutally murdered in front of his wife and children, was the day to go in on his politics with facts that Susanna immediately questioned at every turn. The worst part? It's like Kevin expected to get off scot-free, because as soon as Susanna grilled him, his voice started to quake, his eyes went wide. Does he think that GMB is that left-leaning that he wouldn't get called out on sharing information without evidence? Is that what we expect from our morning telly? Well, if he's been watching Ed Balls interview his wife, I guess it makes sense. The worst part? It's like Kevin expected to get off scot-free, because as soon as Susanna grilled him, his voice started to quake, his eyes went wide. Does he think that GMB is that left-leaning that he wouldn't get called out on sharing information without evidence? Is that what we expect from our morning telly? Well, if he's been watching Ed Balls interview his wife, I guess it makes sense. Well, Susanna was quick to chime in at each hurdle, calling Kevin extreme and telling him that it's untrue that it was mainly white nationalists who supported him. She told him, "You don't know the nature of all the people who backed him." Madeley chimed in and said, "Mind our language, when a man, a young father, whatever you think of his political statements of the past, when he dies in such a horrendous manner, we have to watch how we speak." Kevin declared that Kirk, who famously hosted his Prove Me Wrong campaign by leading debates at colleges across the U.S., was a hate preacher. Whether or not you agree with his views, and honestly, you could be left or right and not agree with his views, but he did get young people involved and interested in politics and debate, something which is dismissed. Quite frankly, I think politicians rely a little too heavily on the fact that a lot of people will simply read what's on social media rather than fully being educated on politics, and it shows. Why are we now at a point where our morning TV hosts are just spurring any old opinion, from looking at headlines rather than reading actual information? Pro tip: you will not get all the information from a story with just the headline, Everything requires a bit more literary than that. Kevin should know that, at the end of the day, a man was murdered. It doesn't matter what side of the argument you fall on, he was murdered in a crowd, in front of his wife and children. Do we really need to be dragging him on national TV after, without any backing? Viewers certainly don't think so, one user wrote on X. Here's Kevin Maguire making an absolute A*E of himself on TV. They know it, and the look in his eyes indicates that even he knows it. Another said, he makes an A*E of himself every time he opens his mouth. And boy, does he open it a lot. A third wrote, what's more concerning in addition to his lack of empathy is his total lack of factual research. For that, he should be booked again. With ITV facing extreme cost-cutting measures amid their money woes, maybe one of the places they should be looking is their GMB lineup. With mounting backlash over questionable comments and pressure over presenter bias, maybe it's time for bosses to have a refresh.